The red sun hung low in the dusty sky of Illyria 9, casting a deep crimson glow over the barren land. Wind carried the scent of ash and burned metal through the air. The colony had fallen silent. Only one man remained among the ruins. His name was Aaron Cole. He stood before a small mound of soil marked with a simple stone. His hands trembled as he placed a single white flower on it. The flower was artificial, built from the remains of a broken drone. It was all he had left. The grave belonged to his daughter, Lyra. Aaron's eyes were tired, the lines on his face carved deep by grief and exhaustion. His uniform was torn, covered in soot and streaks of dried blood. The once bright patch of the Earth Federation Engineering Corps now looked gray and lifeless. His voice cracked as he spoke softly into the wind. "Lyra, I'm sorry." He knelt beside the grave, his breath shaky. The ground still felt warm from the battle that had ended everything. He could still see the flashes of light in the sky, the explosions that had turned his home into rubble. He remembered how he had tried to reach her, his daughter, his only child, trapped in the lab when the Dominion strike hit. He had found the wreckage later, a shattered cryopod and burned remains. The DNA match was hers. He buried what he found. The air shimmered with heat as he stared at the grave. The silence felt heavy. Around him, the twisted frames of buildings leaned like skeletons of a dead city. A soft rumble of thunder echoed from the distant mountains, but no rain fell. Illyria 9 hadn't seen real rain in years. Aaron closed his eyes, remembering her voice. Lyra had always been different. Her skin had a faint golden hue, and when the sun hit her eyes, they glowed softly, like liquid amber. She used to laugh about it, calling herself a dragon girl. He had told her she was perfect, no matter what others thought. She had been part of the hybrid program, a bridge between humans and an ancient species that once ruled the skies of this planet. But now, that dream lay buried beneath the dirt with her. He whispered again, "I should have protected you." His fingers dug into the soil, and a few tears fell onto the dry ground. He wasn't the kind of man who cried easily. He had survived wars, lost friends, seen worlds burn. But this was different. This was his daughter, his reason for living. The sound of his quiet sobs faded into the wind, swallowed by the empty world around him. The red light dimmed as the twin moons rose slowly on the horizon. One was cracked and broken, a reminder of the orbital battles that had scarred the system. Aaron stared at it blankly, his thoughts drifting. There was no one left to talk to. No one left to care. Then something strange happened. A faint shimmer crossed the edge of his vision. He turned quickly, scanning the rocky hills behind him. For a moment he thought he saw movement, a figure standing among the shadows. But when he blinked, it was gone. He shook his head, thinking it was just exhaustion. He hadn't slept properly in days. He sat down beside the grave, the night wind cold against his face. He spoke again, his voice low and broken. "They said you were dangerous. They didn't see what I saw. You were kind. You wanted peace. You wanted to fly, remember? You always said one day you'd fly above the clouds." His hand brushed against the metal flower. "Now you never will." Far above, lightning flashed silently within the clouds. The sky burned red and gold for a brief second, and in that light, high on the cliffs overlooking the colony, something stirred. A pair of eyes, golden and glowing faintly, watched him. They were filled with sadness and love. They belonged to the one he thought was gone. Lyra watched her father kneel beside her grave. She wanted to call out to him, to tell him she was alive, but she couldn't. Not yet. Her body had changed. Her voice was different. The human part of her still remembered his face, his words, his warmth. But the other part, the dragon within, warned her to stay hidden. There were still enemies nearby. They would kill him if they knew she lived. She watched him for a long time, silent and still. Each tear he shed felt like a blade in her heart. She could hear the faint hum of his heartbeat even from afar. Her new senses were sharper than she could ever imagine. She wanted to reach out, but fear held her back. When Aaron finally stood up and turned away, Lyra followed his movement from the shadows. The wind picked up, swirling the dust around her. She unfurled her wings slightly, testing them. Silver scales shimmered faintly under the moonlight. For a moment, her reflection caught in a broken metal panel, half human, half dragon, a creature that shouldn't exist. As Erin disappeared into the ruins, she whispered softly to herself, "I'll protect you, Dad. I promise." The night grew darker. The wind howled across the dead colony, and in the distance, the faint sound of mechanical drones echoed, searching, scanning, hunting. Lyra crouched low, her eyes narrowing. Her father didn't know it yet, but the war wasn't over, and neither was she. Deep beneath the scorched surface of Illyria 9, silence hung like a heavy shroud. The underground chambers that once held the secret hybrid labs were now a graveyard of shattered glass, twisted metal, and broken dreams. In one of those chambers, buried under layers of molten rock, something began to stir. Lyra Cole opened her eyes. At first, she did not understand where she was. Everything felt strange. Her body was wrapped in thick layers of hardened ash and glowing crystal, pulsing with soft red light. It was warm, almost alive. She remembered the explosion, the fire that had consumed her lab. The shockwave had torn through the cryochamber where she was being kept. Her last memory had been her father's voice, shouting her name, and then nothing but burning light. Now she was here, alive, changed. Her breath came slow and uneven. The air smelled of minerals and heat. She pushed her hand forward and felt the rock crumble like dust beneath her fingers. Her skin glowed faintly, golden lines tracing across it like veins of light. Her fingers were longer now, stronger, tipped with claws that caught the dim light around her. She froze for a moment, staring at her reflection in a broken shard of glass near her feet. Half her face still looked human. Her father's nose, her mother's eyes, but from her temples, thin scales ran down her neck, glinting silver blue. Her pupils had changed too, thin and sharp like a dragon's. Panic filled her chest, but then she remembered what she was, what they had made her to be, a hybrid, a bridge between two worlds. Lyra slowly stood. The cocoon of molten stone cracked open behind her with a sharp hiss. Red light spilled into the tunnel as she took her first steps out of the darkness. The hybrid DNA in her blood had saved her, reshaping her cells to survive what no human could. She was no longer fragile, no longer helpless, but she was not safe either. She could sense movement far above. Machines. The Dominion's drones still scanned the ruins of the colony. They were searching for survivors, or maybe for her remains. The thought made her stomach twist. If they found her father, no, she couldn't let that happen. Lyra closed her eyes, and for the first time, she listened. Not with human ears, but with something deeper. The world itself hummed around her. She could feel the heat of the magma rivers flowing nearby, the distant rumble of engines in the sky, and somewhere above, the faint, familiar rhythm of a heartbeat she knew better than her own. Her father was alive. She felt relief so strong it almost broke her. Her claws dug into the rock. He had survived the attack, but he thought she was dead. She could feel his grief like a cold wind pressing against her heart. She wanted to run to him, to show him that she was alive, but reason held her back. If the Dominion saw her, they would come for him again. She couldn't let them use him. Not again. Lyra made her way through the tunnels. Each step echoed softly, her bare feet leaving faint scorch marks on the ground. Strange energy flowed through her veins. Heat, strength, and something ancient that whispered in her mind. A voice that wasn't quite her own. The dragon DNA inside her spoke like a memory from another lifetime. Protect the blood. Protect the fire. She didn't know what it meant, but the words made her heart race. When she reached a narrow passage that led upward, she stopped. Through a crack in the stone, she saw faint light, the crimson sky above Illyria. Her wings twitched instinctively. She spread them for the first time. They were smaller than she remembered from the lab tests, but still wide enough to catch the air. The scales shimmered like liquid metal. For a moment, she thought she could fly. Then she heard it, the distant roar of an engine. She ducked low, eyes narrowing. Through the crack, She saw the Dominion patrol ships scanning the ruins. Bright blue searchlights swept across the colony, pausing briefly over the area where her father's small camp stood. Her chest tightened. They were looking for survivors. Her instincts took over. Heat built in her chest, rising up her throat. She turned her head and exhaled sharply. A thin stream of fire burst from her lips, cutting through the air and melting a section of the stone wall. She stared at it, stunned. It didn't burn her. The fire had felt like breathing. So this was what she had become. The sound of drones grew louder. She crouched low, her eyes flashing gold. If they reached her father, they would kill him. She had to move. She took a deep breath and climbed toward the surface, her claws finding purchase in the stone. The moment she broke through the crust, the wind hit her face, dry, hot, and filled with dust. The colony stretched below her, glowing faintly under the red moons. She could see him, a lone figure walking through the ruins toward the old shelter. Her father. Her throat tightened. She wanted to call out, but she stopped herself. A Dominion recon drone drifted overhead, scanning the area. Lyra's eyes followed it. She leapt into the air with silent speed, her wings spreading wide. The wind rushed past her as she soared above the ruins, keeping to the shadows of the cliffs. When the drone turned toward her father, she moved. One beat of her wings sent her flying faster than the machine could react. She landed behind it, dug her claws into the metal shell, and tore it apart. Sparks scattered like stars across the dark sky. The wreck fell silently into the sand. Aaron never saw it. He kept walking, unaware that his daughter, reborn and watching, had just saved his life. Lyra crouched on the edge of the cliff, breathing hard. Her heart pounded, but not from fear. For the first time since waking, she felt something else inside her. Purpose. She would stay hidden. She would protect him. And when the time came, she would make those who hurt them pay. The wind carried her whisper across the empty land. "I'm still here, Dad. You're not alone." The morning on Illyria 9 came quietly, though there was no true sunrise. The red haze that filled the sky dimmed the light of the twin suns until the land looked forever caught between dusk and dawn. Aaron Cole sat near the edge of the old colony's central courtyard, his back against a cracked wall, watching the horizon. He had spent another sleepless night, haunted by memories and dreams he wished he could forget. He had started to rebuild small things. A tent, a fire pit, a transmitter that didn't work. His hands needed something to do, something to keep his mind from breaking. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw the flames that had taken Lyra. He heard her voice, her laughter, her promise that she would make him proud. He could almost feel her small hand in his again. But then, the silence would return, and the weight of loss would crush him all over again. Unknown to him, far above the dead colony, a Dominion patrol ship descended through the atmosphere. Its engines burned a deep blue as it cut through the clouds, heading straight for the ruins. Inside the ship, Captain Maravas stood by the command window, her dark uniform reflecting the cold light from the control panels. "Commander," said one of the officers, "the scanners still show heat traces from the colony. Likely one survivor, possibly human." Voss folded her arms. "Then we finish what we started. No witnesses, no data left behind." She had been the one to lead the assault on Illyria's hybrid facility. The Dominion had ordered the destruction of all research tied to human dragon experiments. To her, these hybrids were a threat, an unnatural mix that could one day challenge Dominion control. She had destroyed every lab, every scientist, every record. Or so she thought. When her ship landed on the outskirts of the colony, soldiers spread out with scanners and weapons ready. They moved quietly, their steps crunching over the ash. Drones floated above them, mapping the ruins and searching for energy signatures. Aaron noticed them first when he heard the low hum in the distance. His heart froze. He grabbed his pack and the old rifle he had kept since the war. The sound grew louder. He climbed up a broken tower and saw them. Dominion troops, their armor shining under the red light. He swore under his breath. They were back. He didn't know why they had returned. The war was over. The lab was gone. What more did they want? He thought of running, but he knew there was nowhere to go. The colony was surrounded by desert for hundreds of miles. He stayed low and tried to think. Maybe if he hid in the tunnels beneath the city, they wouldn't find him. High above him, watching from the cliffs, Lyra crouched behind a rock ledge. Her golden eyes narrowed as she studied the soldiers moving through the colony. The sight of the Dominion crest made her chest burn. She remembered the day they had come. She remembered the screams. Her wings shifted slightly as anger coursed through her. Then she saw him, her father, moving quickly between the ruins, trying to stay out of sight. Fear gripped her for a second. They were hunting him. They didn't even know she was alive, and yet they were still trying to erase all traces of what they had done. She couldn't let them find him. She waited until one of the drones floated close to the cliffs. This blue light scanned the rocks. Lyra closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The air trembled as the heat built inside her chest. When the drone passed directly above, she leapt from her hiding place and struck. Her claws tore through the machine's metal shell. It exploded in a burst of sparks and smoke. She landed silently, wings folding close to her body. The other drones immediately changed direction, scanning for movement. But Lyra had already disappeared into the shadows. Down below, Captain Voss frowned as her console beeped. "Report," she demanded. "Drone 12 lost contact," said the officer. "Energy spike detected before it went offline." Voss's eyes narrowed. "Energy spike?" "Yes, Captain. High temperature burst. Not mechanical. Organic." She stared out the window toward the cliffs. So, the hybrid survived. Aaron, meanwhile, had reached the old engineering tunnels. He moved quickly, clutching his rifle. He could hear the soldiers above, their boots echoing through the ruins. He found the hatch to the lower section and climbed down. The air was thick with dust, but it felt safer underground. He reached a small chamber and sat against the wall, breathing hard. "I can't keep doing this," he whispered to himself. "Lyra, I wish you were here." Above him, in the red-lit sky, Lyra watched as the Dominion troops tightened their search. She wanted to tear them all apart, but she knew if she attacked now, they would bring reinforcements, and they would find her father. She needed to be careful. She would protect him quietly, from the dark. Captain Voss stood on the command ramp of her ship as a strong wind swept across the ruins. She turned to her crew. "Search every corner. I want confirmation. If the hybrid is here, I want her head." The soldiers nodded and moved out again. Lyra crouched low, her eyes glowing faintly. She whispered softly to herself, a promise forming in her heart. "You'll never touch him. Not while I breathe." The storm above the colony began to rise again, lightning flashing behind the crimson clouds. The Dominion soldiers did not see the faint shimmer of silver wings hidden in the smoke, or the shadow that moved silently above them, watching, waiting, ready to strike when the time came. The night on Illyria 9 burned quietly. The storm that had rolled over the colony had left a thick fog of ash drifting through the ruins. The wind whispered through broken towers, carrying faint echoes of a world long dead. Aaron Cole moved slowly through the wreckage, clutching a small flashlight and his rifle. The beam cut through the dust, shaking slightly in his trembling hand. He was searching for supplies, batteries, food packs, anything that could keep him alive a little longer. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. Every sound made him flinch. The Dominion troops were still out there, searching the colony. He could hear their distant machines now and then, the mechanical hum that made the hair rise on his neck. He stayed close to the shadows, slipping through collapsed corridors and hiding behind debris when he had to. It was quiet, too quiet. As he crouched near an overturned vehicle, something caught his eye, a trail of scorched metal leading deeper into the ruins. He followed it carefully, his boots crunching over the ash. The air grew hotter the farther he went. At the end of the trail, he found what looked like the remains of a drone, melted clean through. The metal was warped, like it had been hit by fire hotter than any weapon he knew. He knelt beside it and touched the edge. It was smooth, glassy. His breath caught. This isn't human tech," he whispered. A chill ran down his spine. Then he saw them, claw marks in the dirt, deep and wide. He froze, staring at them. They were too large for any animal left on this planet. His heart started to race. Aaron turned quickly, scanning the shadows. "Who's there?" His voice cracked as it echoed through the empty street. No answer came, only the low hum of the wind. But as he turned to leave, he felt something. A warmth, like the air itself had shifted. He stopped. The hair on his arms stood up. Behind him, a figure moved, fast, silent, and graceful. He spun around, aiming the rifle toward the noise, but saw nothing. Only the flicker of light through the fog. Then, a whisper, faint, almost human. "Dad!" Aaron froze. The rifle shook in his hands. "Lyra?" he whispered. The sound had come from nowhere and everywhere at once. His throat tightened. He took a slow step forward. "Lyra, if that's you, please, say something." The silence returned, but he could feel something watching him. It wasn't hostile. It was gentle, familiar. He lowered his weapon, unsure if he was losing his mind. "I'm hearing things," he muttered. "I'm just tired. That's all." But deep down, something told him he wasn't wrong. Something or someone was out there. Above him, high on a half-collapsed tower, Lyra crouched among the shadows. Her eyes glowed faintly gold as she watched him move through the fog. She could see how thin he had become, how he stumbled slightly when he walked. Her heart ached. She wanted to go to him, to hold him, to tell him she was alive. But she couldn't. Not yet. Dominion patrols were everywhere, and if they saw her, they would come after him again. A sharp sound broke the silence, the mechanical growl of engines. Dominion dropships approached from the west. Aaron ducked behind a wall as blue searchlights swept across the ruins. He pressed himself flat, holding his breath. One of the lights passed right over his hiding place but didn't stop. Lyra spread her wings, ready to strike if they got too close. Her claws flexed. The fire built inside her chest again. But she held it back. If she attacked, they would call reinforcements. She had to wait. The ships hovered low, scanning the ground with sensors. Then one of them changed course, moving directly toward Aaron's position. He saw it and knew he was trapped. He ran, darting between the ruins as energy bolts hit the ground behind him, kicking up clouds of dust. He tripped, fell hard, and rolled behind a burned-out crawler. The sound of metal boots grew closer. "Target detected," a synthetic voice said above him. Aaron lifted his rifle and fired blindly. The shot hit one of the drones, knocking it off balance, but two more appeared. He could see the red lights of their scanners moving closer. He braced himself, knowing he couldn't fight them all. Then the sky lit up. A streak of silver and fire tore through the air, crashing into the drones like a thunderbolt. The explosion was deafening. Aaron was thrown back, covering his face as heat washed over him. When he looked up, all three drones were gone, reduced to molten scraps. He stared, heart pounding. Smoke and ash swirled in the air, glowing faintly from the fire. Through the haze he saw a shape, tall, shining, and alive. For a brief moment he thought it was a dream. Wings spread wide, eyes burning gold, scales glimmering under the red light. A dragon. No, something like one. Aaron's breath caught in his throat. The figure looked down at him, silent. The light flickered again, and then she was gone, vanished into the fog. He stood there for a long time, staring at the empty sky. His hands shook as he lowered his rifle. "No," he whispered to himself. "It can't be." But deep inside, a memory stirred. A small girl laughing, her eyes glowing in the sunlight, calling herself the Dragon Girl. His chest tightened. He whispered her name like a prayer. "Lyra." From high above, Lyra hovered in the smoke, watching him walk away slowly. The firelight reflected in her eyes. She could see the confusion in his movements, the disbelief. She wanted to tell him the truth, but not yet. She had to make sure the Dominion left first. Below her, the burned wrecks of the drones lay scattered across the ruins. Their twisted metal glowed faintly in the dark, a silent warning to any who dared come closer. Aaron disappeared into the night, his heart heavy with questions and hope he did not dare believe. And from the shadows, the ghost that haunted the flames followed him, unseen, guarding him as the red sky of Illyria burned above them both. The following days on Illyria 9 were filled with tension and fear. The Dominion had not left. Instead, they had increased their presence. Patrol ships circled the skies like vultures, and search teams combed through the ruins with scanners and drones. The Empire wanted answers. Someone had destroyed their machines, and they intended to find out who. Captain Maravas stood on the observation deck of her command ship, her eyes fixed on the burning horizon. The remains of the colony stretched below her like scars on the land. Her voice was calm, but her tone carried ice. "Deploy more drones," she ordered. "If the hybrid is alive, it will reveal itself. And if not, we'll burn this planet until there's nothing left." Her officers obeyed quickly. The hum of engines filled the air as dozens of drones launched from the ship, spreading across the landscape. Down in the ruins, Aaron Cole hid inside the old power plant, the only building that still had walls strong enough to block scanners. He sat in the corner beside a flickering lamp made from salvaged tech, staring at the cold metal floor. He hadn't seen the creature, the thing, since that night, but he couldn't stop thinking about it. The fire, the wings, the way it had moved. Every part of it felt impossible. Yet deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that he knew it. The eyes, those golden eyes, had looked at him with something more than hunger or rage. They had looked at him with sorrow. He whispered to himself, "It can't be her. She's gone." Above him, hidden high in the cliffs beyond the colony, Lyra watched the Dominion forces sweep through her father's world. She could see the energy signatures from their scanners. They were closing in. She spread her wings and leapt from the rocks, gliding silently across the ruins. Her claws dug into the steel roof of a destroyed hangar as she landed. From her position, she could see the patrol routes clearly. She had been watching the soldiers for days, learning their movements. Every night, she destroyed 1 or 2 of their machines, always in silence, always unseen. But it wasn't enough. The Dominion was relentless. They were hunting her, and now they were closing in on Aaron. Lyra clenched her fists. Her claws cut small grooves into the metal. She had to end this before they found him. Down in the command ship, Captain Voss studied a live feed from one of the scanners. "We've located a human life form near Grid 7, said an officer. "Likely a survivor." Voss turned sharply. "Bring him in." Aaron never saw them coming. He was working on a small transmitter trying to boost the signal range when the roof above him exploded. He fell back as Dominion soldiers dropped through the hole, weapons raised. "Don't move," one shouted. "Hands where I can see them." Aaron's heart pounded. He lifted his hands slowly, knowing resistance was useless. They bound his wrists with magnetic cuffs and dragged him outside. He squinted against the bright light of the dropship hovering overhead. Captain Voss stepped down from the ramp, her dark coat billowing in the wind. She looked at him with cold curiosity. "You're Aaron Cole, correct? Former engineer for the Federation." Aaron didn't answer. He stared at her with quiet anger. She smiled faintly. "You worked in the hybrid project. You helped create her. Where is she?" His breath caught. "She's dead," he said firmly. Voss studied him. "We've found remains that say otherwise." She nodded to one of her soldiers. "Take him aboard. If he won't speak here, he'll speak on my ship." As the soldiers pushed him toward the ramp, a sharp sound tore through the air, a deep roar that made the ground tremble. The soldiers froze. Voss turned her head sharply toward the sky. A streak of silver light flashed across the clouds. Then chaos. Something massive slammed into the ground behind them, sending a shockwave through the sand. The dropship tilted as dust exploded into the air. Through the smoke, 2 golden eyes burned bright. The soldiers opened fire, but the bullets melted before reaching their target. A roar answered, fierce and full of fury. Lyra lunged forward, her wings spreading wide as fire poured from her mouth. The Dominion soldiers screamed as their armor melted. The ground turned to glass beneath their boots. Voss shielded her face from the heat, shouting orders, but it was too late. The creature moved like lightning. One swipe of her claws sent the last drone crashing into the rocks. Aaron fell to the ground, his wrists still bound. He looked up, his breath catching. The light cleared, and for the first time, he saw her clearly. Not the small girl he had raised, but something larger, stronger, and yet heartbreakingly familiar. The silver scales, the golden eyes, the fire that danced along her skin. His lips trembled. "Lyra!" She froze at the sound of his voice. The rage in her expression softened. For a moment, the battlefield went silent. She turned her head toward him, her eyes wide with emotion. But the sound of approaching ships broke the moment. Reinforcements were coming. Voss stood and shouted, "Focus fire! Bring her down!" Energy blasts rained from the sky. Lyra spread her wings, covering her father as fire rained around them. The ground shook. Aaron shouted for her to run, but she wouldn't move. She turned toward the sky and unleashed a blast of pure flame that split the clouds apart. The Dominion ships scattered, engines screaming as they fled the storm she created. The fire burned bright enough to light the desert for miles. When the light faded, the sky was empty. The Dominion ships were gone. Only the ashes of soldiers remained. Lyra turned to her father, breathing hard. He looked up at her, still stunned. She reached down, gently breaking the magnetic cuffs with her claws. Her voice was soft but strong. "We don't have much time." Aaron stared at her, speechless. You're alive." She gave a faint smile. "Always was." He wanted to speak, to ask 1,000 questions, but she lifted her head suddenly, eyes narrowing. More ships were coming. The Dominion wouldn't stop. She looked back at him, her face full of determination. "I'll protect you," she said, "no matter what." And before he could respond, she grabbed his arm and launched into the sky, her wings slicing through the red clouds as the storm of war rose again behind them. The flight through the storm was a blur of fire and wind. Aaron held tightly to Lyra's arm as her wings beat against the air, cutting through the red clouds that hung over Illyria 9. The Dominion ships behind them fired streaks of blue energy, but she moved faster than their tracking systems could follow. Each blast passed harmlessly through the smoke trails she left behind. When they finally cleared the storm, the horizon opened into a range of jagged cliffs that stretched for miles. Lyra dove toward a narrow canyon, slowing as they reached a hidden valley shielded by magnetic interference from old mining equipment. The sensors of the Dominion would not find them here. She landed softly near the mouth of a cavern. Aaron stumbled as his feet touched the ground, his heart still racing from the flight. Lyra folded her wings, her silver scales dimming in the shadows. The glow in her eyes faded until only the faintest gold shimmer remained. Aaron looked around. The valley was quiet. Ancient machines lay half-buried in dust, remnants of a long-forgotten colony. "Where are we?" he asked. Lyra glanced toward the dark opening of the cave. "A place the Empire forgot. I've been hiding here for weeks. It's safe, for now." Aaron followed her inside. The cave stretched deep underground, lit by glowing veins of crystal. She had made a home here, simple but functional. A pile of blankets in one corner, a few salvage tools, and a small generator that hummed softly. He turned to face her, still trying to find the words. "I don't understand. How did you survive? They told me your ship exploded." Lyra sat down near the crystals, the light reflecting off her scales. "It did," she said quietly. "But I wasn't on it when it happened. The Dominion wanted me alive. I escaped before they could take me." Aaron's eyes widened. "You escaped? How? You were just a child." Her gaze softened. "Not anymore." He stared at her for a long moment. The woman or creature before him was both familiar and completely changed. The small girl he remembered, the one who used to chase fireflies and draw stars in the sand, was gone. In her place stood something powerful, something otherworldly. Lyra looked away. "I didn't mean for you to see me like this." Aaron shook his head. "You're my daughter. I don't care what you look like." She smiled faintly but didn't meet his eyes. "You should. I'm not the same. They changed me. The hybrid program, it wasn't just about fusing human and dragon DNA. They made me into a weapon. Eren stepped closer. You were never a weapon to me. You were my child. For a long moment, silence filled the cave. The hum of the generator was the only sound. Then Lyra sighed and stood. We can't stay long. The Dominion won't stop hunting us. I've seen what they're building in orbit, something big. They call it the cleansing fire. Eren frowned. A superweapon? She nodded. They plan to use it on Illyria 9 to erase all evidence of their failure. Everyone left on this planet will burn. Eren's mind raced. Then we have to warn the others. There are still survivors out there. Lyra turned toward the entrance of the cave. That's what I've been doing. I've been guiding the refugees to safety at night. But now that they know you're alive, the Empire will use you as bait. They'll come for you again. Eren clenched his fists. Then we make a plan. We fight back. Lyra looked at him, surprised. Fight back? You're just one man. You're not alone, he interrupted. You've already saved lives. I can help. I know their systems, their weaknesses. If we can disrupt their power network, we might slow their weapon long enough to escape. Lyra hesitated. The determination in his voice reminded her of the man she had lost. The father who had once stood against the Empire's cruelty even when he had no power. She nodded slowly. All right, but we'll need allies. Eren took a deep breath. Then let's find them. That night, under a sky of burning red, Lyra and Eren traveled through the valley toward an old communications tower. The air smelled of iron and ash. In the distance, the lights of Dominion patrols moved like stars on the ground. They moved silently through the shadows, staying low as they reached the tower's base. Eren began working quickly, pulling off access panels and connecting old circuits. Lyra stood watch, her senses alert. Every sound made her wings twitch. The Dominion's drones were everywhere. At last, the transmitter hummed to life. Eren typed a short, encrypted message into the console. To all survivors, meet at the Ridge of Dawnlight. The Empire comes. We fight together. The signal sent, Eren turned off the machine. Lyra looked up at the horizon. They'll come, she said softly. He smiled faintly. Then we'd better be ready. As they walked back toward the hidden valley, the night sky filled with faint glimmers. Small ships, moving slowly across the stars. Lyra's eyes narrowed. They've already begun deployment. Eren followed her gaze. Then this planet's last stand starts now. Lyra spread her wings, the silver edges catching the moonlight. We'll make them remember why they should never have come here. She lifted off into the air, the wind swirling around her as Eren watched from below. His heart filled with a mix of pride and fear. The fire of rebellion had been lit, and this time, the Empire would feel the wrath of both man and dragon. The first light of dawn spread across Illyria 9, painting the sky in streaks of red and gold. The ruins of the planet glowed faintly under the rising sun, but the beauty of the moment could not hide the storm that was coming. In the distance, dark shapes moved through the clouds, the Dominion fleet. Eren stood at the edge of the ridge, overlooking the valley below. Around him, small groups of survivors were gathering. Men and women from scattered colonies, soldiers who had refused to surrender, engineers who had escaped the Dominion's purge. All of them drawn by the message he had sent. They carried scavenged weapons and worn armor, their faces tired but determined. Lyra landed beside him, her wings folding against her back. Her eyes glowed softly in the dim light. They came, she said quietly. Eren nodded. Enough to make a difference. He looked down at the crude barricades and makeshift turrets the survivors had built during the night. It wasn't much, but it was something. He turned to Lyra. How long do we have before they reach us? She glanced toward the horizon. An hour, maybe less. The Dominion has deployed heavy carriers. They're coming fast. Eren exhaled slowly. Then we use every second. He moved among the survivors, helping where he could, repairing weapons, checking shield emitters. Lyra watched him for a while before walking to the edge of the ridge. From there, she could see the enemy ships breaking through the clouds, sleek black vessels. their hulls shining with blue energy. She felt the fire rising inside her, the ancient power that had been forced into her blood. But this time she wasn't afraid of it. She accepted it. Aaron climbed back up beside her. If this doesn't work, she cut him off gently. It will. He smiled faintly. You always were stubborn. Before she could answer, the sky erupted. Dozens of Dominion dropships descended like falling stars, their engines howling as they closed in on the ridge. The ground trembled beneath their approach. Alarms blared across the camp. Positions! Aaron shouted. Everyone, get to cover! Lyra spread her wings and leapt into the air. The survivors watched as she soared high above them, her silver scales blazing in the sunlight. She opened her mouth and unleashed a torrent of flame that cut across the sky, striking the first wave of ships. 2 of them exploded instantly, their burning wreckage spiraling into the valley below. The Dominion's return fire was brutal. Plasma bolts streaked through the air, exploding against the ridge. The survivors fired back, their weapons glowing red from the heat. The sound of battle shook the ground. Lyra dove between the ships, tearing through metal with her claws. Her fire melted armor and engines alike. But there were too many of them. Energy blasts grazed her wings, sending sparks of pain through her nerves. She roared, spinning midair, and slammed into another dropship, ripping it apart with one powerful strike. On the ground, Aaron fought beside the survivors. He wasn't a soldier, but he knew how to think. He rerouted power from broken generators to boost the defensive shields. When the enemy troops landed, he grabbed a rifle and joined the line. Every blast he fired echoed the anger and love that burned inside him. The battle raged for hours. The ridge was covered in smoke and fire. The Dominion pushed forward relentlessly, their commander, Captain Voss, leading them from a massive command walker that moved like a steel beast through the chaos. Voss's voice echoed across the comms, cold and sharp. Capture the hybrid alive. Kill everyone else. Aaron heard it through a stolen radio and cursed under his breath. He turned toward the command walker, where the Dominion flag waved above the machine. Lyra! He shouted through the comm. Voss is on the ground. Lyra turned sharply in the sky, her golden eyes locked onto the massive walker. The beast was armed with plasma cannons that were tearing through the ridge defenses. Without hesitation, she dove. The walker's guns turned toward her, firing a storm of energy blasts. Lyra twisted through them, the shots grazing her scales and wings, but she didn't stop. With a roar that shook the valley, she slammed into the machine, claws digging deep into its armor. Metal screamed as she tore open its side. Inside, Captain Voss tried to steady herself as alarms blared. Focus all fire, she screamed. But before her soldiers could respond, Lyra's claws ripped through the command deck. She reached in, her eyes burning like suns, and met Voss's gaze. This is for Illyria, she said softly. The last thing Voss saw was fire. The explosion lit up the entire battlefield. The command walker burst into flames, collapsing into molten metal. The Dominion troops hesitated, their formation breaking. The survivors took the chance to strike back, pushing forward with renewed strength. Aaron watched the fire fade, searching the sky desperately. Lyra, he shouted. Then he saw her, falling from the smoke, wings tattered, trailing silver light. She crashed onto the ridge near him. He ran to her side, falling to his knees. Her breathing was shallow, her body covered in burns. Don't move, he said quickly, his voice shaking. You're going to be all right. Lyra opened her eyes weakly. Did we win? Aaron looked toward the horizon. The Dominion ships were retreating. The survivors were cheering. Yeah, he said softly. We did. She smiled faintly. Good. Her eyes closed again, her head resting gently against his arm. Aaron held her close as the wind swept across the ridge. Around them, the fires began to die. The survivors gathered, silent and weary, watching as the sky cleared. The war for Illyria 9 wasn't over yet, but for the first time in years, there was hope. And as the sun rose higher, Aaron whispered to his daughter. You made them remember who we are. The days after the battle at Dawnlight Ridge passed slowly. Smoke still hung over the valley, and the sky burned a dim red from the wreckage of the Dominion ships that drifted in orbit above. The survivors worked quietly, burying their dead, tending to the wounded, and gathering what little remained of their supplies. The victory had been costly, but they had won. For the first time in years, the people of Illyria 9 had driven the Dominion back. Aaron Cole sat beside a small campfire near the edge of the ridge, his hands blackened with soot. He looked out across the silent battlefield where the flames had once raged. Every scar on the land reminded him of the price they had paid. His gaze drifted to the makeshift medical tent behind him, where Lyra lay resting. She had survived barely. Her scales were cracked, her wings torn, but her breathing had steadied. The survivors treated her as something between a miracle and a myth. To them, she wasn't a monster or an experiment. She was their guardian, the dragon who had burned the sky to save them. Aaron stood and stepped quietly inside the tent. Lyra's golden eyes flickered open as he approached. She smiled faintly. You should be resting too, she whispered. He sat beside her, shaking his head. Not until you're better. She tried to laugh, but it came out weak. You always worry too much. I'm your father, he said simply. It's my job. For a moment, they sat in silence, the only sound the soft hum of the generators outside. Aaron reached for her hand, feeling the faint warmth of her skin. Still human in parts, still familiar. You saved us, he said softly. You saved everyone. Her eyes dimmed a little. Not everyone, she said. Too many are gone. Aaron nodded. But because of you, some still live. That means something. Lyra turned her head toward the tent flap, watching the flickering light of the fires outside. What happens now? She asked. The Dominion will come again. They always do. Aaron looked down at the ground, then back at her. Then we make sure they regret it. We'll rebuild. We'll send word to the outer colonies. Let the galaxy know what happened here. Lyra's voice was quiet but firm. You think they'll listen? He smiled faintly. After this, they'd better. She closed her eyes again, exhaustion washing over her. Promise me something, she whispered. If I don't make it. Don't, Aaron interrupted quickly. You're going to make it. But she continued anyway, her voice soft as the wind. If I don't, promise me you'll keep fighting. Promise me you'll protect them. Aaron swallowed hard, his throat tight. I promise. Lyra smiled faintly, her hand tightening around his. Then I can rest. That night, Aaron sat outside the tent, staring up at the stars. The red haze was fading, replaced by clear patches of black and silver. He could almost see Earth's old constellations in the distance. Somewhere, beyond those stars, the Dominion regrouped. Somewhere, the war still burned. He thought of Lyra, of the child she once was, of the fire she had become. He thought of all the people who had died because of the Dominion's greed. And in that quiet moment, he made a silent vow. The fire would never die. Weeks passed. The survivors began rebuilding small settlements around the ridge. They named the area sanctuaries Rise, in honor of the battle that had saved them. The Dominion, licking its wounds, had withdrawn its main fleet to regroup elsewhere, leaving Illyria 9 to its fate. But everyone knew it was only a matter of time before they returned. By then, Lyra had recovered enough to walk again. Her wings were scarred, but they still carried her through the air. When she first took flight over the new settlement, the people below cheered. Children ran to the edges of the cliffs to watch her soar, their faces lit with awe. For them, she wasn't a creature of fear. She was hope. Aaron watched her from below, pride filling his chest. He had thought he'd lost her forever. Now, she had become something far greater than he could have imagined. That evening, as the sun set behind the Crimson Mountains, Lyra landed beside him. They're rebuilding faster than I expected, she said. He smiled. They have something to believe in now. She looked down at the small fires flickering across the valley. They believe in you too. Aaron shook his head. No, they believe in us. She tilted her head, her golden eyes reflecting the firelight. You still plan to fight the Dominion, don't you? Yes, he said simply. They'll be back. And when they come, they won't find a broken world waiting. Lyra smiled faintly. Then I'll be ready. Aaron placed a hand on her arm. You've done enough, Lyra. You don't need to carry this alone. She looked toward the stars, her expression calm but resolute. Maybe not, but it's who I am now. You once told me dragons don't exist to destroy, they exist to protect. Maybe that's what I was meant to be. Aaron nodded slowly, emotion tightening his chest. Then protect us, my daughter. Protect them all. As night fell, Lyra spread her wings once more and rose into the sky. The flames of the camp reflected off her scales, making her look like a streak of silver fire cutting through the darkness. The survivors watched in silence, knowing they were witnessing the beginning of something greater. The war was far from over. The Dominion would return, but Illyria 9 would be ready. And somewhere in the stars, the legend of the dragon who defied an empire would spread. A story of fire, love, and defiance. A story that would remind the galaxy that even in the darkest night, hope still burns. The fire never dies.